What's up, Vapers? Welcome to another edition of Maximum Vapage with GypsyJen. So I've decided to do a group of videos designed specifically for the beginning vapor in mind. When I first started vaping, I had a ton of questions about things, and sometimes I was a little embarrassed to ask people because I felt like I should know this stuff. So in the hopes that maybe someone else out there might feel the same way, hopefully this series of videos will assist you. So the topic we want to talk about today is what is PG and VG and what do they do to your e-liquid. So the basics of your e-liquid, you have four components. You have PG, which stands for propylene glycol. You have VG, which stands for vegetable glycerin. You have your flavorings, and then you have your nicotine. And those are the four main parts of any e-liquid. Now, what exactly is PG and what does it do to an e-liquid? PG is what is responsible for carrying the flavor in your liquids. It is much thinner than VG, and it also delivers the throat hit, or that sensation in the back of your throat when you are taking a vape. VG is what is responsible for your vapor production. And it is much smoother and it's much thicker. So when you hear people talk about PG-VG ratios, you'll hear people say, you know, I have a max VG liquid, or I have a 50-50 or 70-30 or whatever. And what those numbers are referring to is the percentage of the liquid that is PG versus VG, or VG versus PG. So let's take a look at a couple of different liquids, and I'll explain what their PG-VG ratios are and how that translates into the type of vapor that liquid produces. So this liquid here, if you can see how fast it moves around, is a 70 PG, 30 VG liquid. Now, this liquid is designed that way to be extremely flavorful. The higher PG liquids are designed to be more flavorful. They're also designed to give you more of a throat hit. Now, you have to be careful with the higher PG liquids because the higher PG liquids can cause you to become dehydrated if you're not drinking enough waters. PG will dry your system out. So with any vaping, you should definitely be, making sure you're drinking a lot of water, but particularly if you're using a higher PG liquid. Now, more and more people are discovering that they have a sensitivity or have an allergy to PG. So, if you are vaping a higher PG liquid and you start developing a sort of tickling in the back of your throat, or you start getting a sort of, not really numbness, but it can feel like if you eat something that's too hot and you get that weird feeling on your tongue for a day or two afterwards, you can develop that sort of feeling. It can also be a strong peppery flavor when you inhale your liquid. Those are symptoms of a possible PG sensitivity or PG allergy. There are a lot of people who are finding that they have a sensitivity to propylene glycol. And if you happen to be one of those people, there's nothing to worry about, because you can, there's plenty of liquids out there that are max VG, and there's even some liquids out there now that are 100% VG, where you won't have to worry about your the allergy that you may or may not have. You may not be completely allergic to it, but a lot of people are finding that they're sensitive to it. A higher PG liquid is not going to produce a lot of vapor. You're still going to get some vapor from it because, you know, because of the VG element, but it's not going to be, you're not going to be blowing clouds with it. So next we're going to move on to a 50-50 liquid. This is what a 50-50 liquid looks like, and you can tell how it sort of moves around in the bottle. It's a little bit more viscous than the higher PG liquid. A lot of companies use a standard mix of 50-50, and it's 50% PG and 50% VG. And I think the reason for that is with your 50-50 liquids, you can, as long as the manufacturer is using a good quality propylene glycol, you can use a 50-50 liquid in pretty much any device you want to use. Now, a lot of people that use drippers or rebuildable dripping atomizers is the official name for them, prefer not to use a 50-50 liquid. They like to use the higher VG liquids, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But with a 50-50 liquid, you can pretty much use that liquid in any device you want to use it in. It's not going to be too thick for your tanks. Even the really cheap CE4 tanks, which is a tank that looks like this, you can also use it in a dripper or an RTA or an RDA. So I personally prefer 50-50 liquids because I like the flavor. To me, I get more flavor out of a 50-50 liquid than I do a higher VG liquid. But I don't like, usually I don't like to go any higher than 50% PG because of the harshness that it develops on my throat. I don't like the harshness that the PG has. So, and I like to drip, and I also like, you know, I've used tanks and I drip. So that's just my own personal preference. And then you have your higher VG liquids. A lot of companies are using a standard 70-30, 70% VG, 30% PG. That's another great ratio that you can pretty much use in anything. Now, you may have issues using a liquid with a higher VG content if you're using a CE4 tank like the one I was just showing you. And that's because the way those tanks wick, the coil in a lot of those tanks are in the top of the tank versus the bottom of the tank. And the vegetable glycerin, because it's so thick, the device has a hard time absorbing it through the wicks to the heating element, which is what produces the vapor. So if you're using that sort of device, a pen style device, I would recommend not going too high on your VG. You know, maybe a 60-40 with the VG, or maybe 65. You may get lucky and can use a 70-30 if you want, but I wouldn't recommend going too much higher than that. The advantages of using a higher VG liquid is the smoothness of it. And when you get into the more advanced types of devices, especially when you get into like your box mods, and if you're running it at a lower build, or if you're running it at a higher watt, you're going to be inhaling significantly more vapor. And if you have a lot of PG in there, it's going to be super harsh on your throat. You just won't be able to do it. So the VG is much, much smoother. The downside to a higher VG liquid, especially if you're using a dripper, or if you're using a tank that has a rebuildable coil, is that the higher VG liquids can tend to gunk up your coils faster. So with tank systems that have replaceable coils in them, if you're using a higher VG liquid, you'll tend to have to replace that coil more often. but you are going to get a smoother vape. So it's kind of like you have to weigh your options. And let me show you guys what a higher VG liquid looks like. This is actually a max VG liquid, but I'm going to show you. You can see how thick that is. But it's much smoother. Now with some higher VG liquids, you may find there's not as much flavor, particularly if you're using them in a tank. Now if you're using a dripping atomizer, you shouldn't have that problem too much, because most reputable companies that are making the max VG and the higher VG liquids have figured out a way to make their higher VG liquids without sacrificing the flavor. And that's when you find a company, if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into the higher VG liquids, and you find a max VG liquid that still gives you great flavor, like a 50/50 liquid or something that's lower VG, that's when you know you've got something really good. So that's pretty much the basics for PG and VG and how they relate to your liquid. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can always email me at maximumvapage@gmail.com. And I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I will be doing a whole series, like I said, of videos that are designed specifically with the beginning vapor in mind. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope this was able to help some of you out. Thanks.